Thank you, Chair Lavanino. For the roll call, Director Williams? Capps?
Aye.
Hartman? Hartman? Nelson?
Here.
Osborne?
Here.
Infante?
Here.
Julian?
Here.
King? Patino?
Here.
Parodi?
Here.
Clark?
Here.
Rouse?
Here.
And Chair Lavanino.
I'm here. Please rise and pledge the flag with, I'll start. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. That takes us to item 3, public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have any requests to speak from the public?
Chair Lavanino, we have no requests for public comment, and I see no requests from for anyone in attendance over the internet. And Santa Maria, anyone for public comment?
No one in Santa Maria with
Thank
public
you.
comment.
Okay, that takes us to item number 4, Madam Clerk.
Chair and directors, today the board is agendized to discuss one item in closed session. It's conference with real property negotiators per Government Code 54956.8. There are 3 real property parcels at issue. The first property negotiating parties are Derek Householder Trust, Denise L. Smith Trust, and Peter A. LeVay Trust for assessor parcel number 009610004. The 2 other properties, the negotiating parties are Steve and Shannon Harvey for assessor parcel number 009294007 and 009294008. The agency negotiators are Sbcag Executive Director Margie Kern and Fred Luna, Director of Project and Delivery Construction. I estimate the time 10 to 20 minutes for closed session and would recommend making sure there's no public comment for closed session prior to recessing.
Thank you, Council. Do we have any public comment on our closed session items?
Chair Lavanino, we have no requests for public comment.
Okay, we're going to recess to closed session. We'll be back in about 10 or 15 minutes. Me neither.
Hey, Terry, can you hear us?
All right, we're going to reconvene coming out of closed session. County Council, can we get a report out of closed session, please?
Chair and Directors, today the board met in closed session to discuss one item, conference with real property negotiators per Government Code 54956.8, and the board took no reportable action.
Excellent. That takes us to our consent calendar. We have a number of items. Is there any items that the community wishes to pull for discussion? Madam Clerk?
No request for poll.
Any directors wish to pull any items? Seeing none, can we get a motion to approve the,
And just for there's no public comment.
well, it'd be hard for them to comment if they didn't pull the item, so, yeah. All right, so, moved by Director Patino, second by Rouse. Roll call, please.
Director Williams? Aye. Capps?
Aye.
Hartman? Nelson?
Aye.
Osborne?
Aye.
Infante? No.
Temporarily stepped out of the room.
Okay, thank you. Julian?
Aye.
King?
Aye.
Patino? Aye. Perotti? Aye. Clark?
Aye.
Rouse?
Aye.
And Chair Lavanino?
Aye.
Motion passes 12-0.
Excellent. Takes us to item 6. Madam Clerk.
Item 6, Measure A Strategic Plan. Receive presentation on update to Measure A Strategic Plan and provide direction to Sbcag staff.
Circus.
Sbcag. Is that better? Yep. It wasn't, okay. All right, thank you, appreciate that. Sarkis Katrick, Director of Programming with Sbcag, and I'm joined today by Fred Luna, Director of Project Delivery and Construction, and Jackie Mata of the programming team. Next slide, please. All right, so we're excited to be here today in front of your board to give you an update on the Measure A transportation sales tax measure for Santa Barbara County. Today is intended to be an introductory item to your board for us to receive any questions and feedback, and then we plan on having regular check-ins with your board on the strategic plan. We do have a 5-year requirement associated with the Measure A strategic plan, which Jackie will cover, and so that puts us at approving the next update by December of 2025. There are a lot of things that have happened in the last couple of years that have impacted the update, which we look forward to sharing today. And as I mentioned, this is meant to be interactive for the board, so please interrupt us at any time with any questions. So for today's presentation, we have 3 parts for you. The first is Measure A background, just to give you the latest on a little bit of history on Measure A and the latest on where we are. And then the next section will be focused on what we'd like to do with the strategic plan update. And then the third section will be looking at a request to amend the Measure A investment plan, which is approved by voters, which impacts the Measure A strategic plan. And then we'll talk about next steps after that. Next slide, please. Okay, you can go to the next one too. Thank you. All right, Measure A is Santa Barbara County's transportation sales tax measure. It was approved by voters in 2008 as a renewal to Measure D. Measure D was our prior measure, which lasted for 20 years. It's a half-cent sales tax measure, dedicated transportation that helps meet our county deliver on regional and local transportation goals. In terms of the funding universe, Measure A is the most flexible fund source for transportation that we have. So it's a really important tool in the toolbox for us to deliver on projects, whether it's under different phases, but also to take that money and then leverage it for federal and state money through competitive opportunities. Our measure is a 30-year measure. Back in 2008, when we presented Measure A to the voters, we were looking at generating $35 million per year. Since then, Measure A revenues have increased by 50% per year. So that's fantastic news. We're cognizant of any changes in the economy, but we do have a consultant called HDL that helps us with revenue monitoring, and actually a lot of the local agencies in our county also use HDL. In terms of what we've leveraged, so we promised voters back in 2008 that we would leverage $500 million. So far, we're over $600 million, and we're not even halfway done with the measure. And that's just Sbcag tracking things. I'm sure our local partners have used Measure A to leverage additional funds. So as we get closer, and once we have the resources, we'll track as much as we can in terms of leveraging. But that's a big promise to the voters that we're really happy about. And then, so we talked about leveraging. The projects that we have in Measure A, which I'll go over in a second, there are the local priorities, but there are also regional projects, which we promised to voters, which we call regional named projects. Many of those projects rely on Measure A, but they also rely on regional funding. There's two additional fund sources through regional. One is called the Regional Surface Transportation Program, which Sbcag receives. It's federal money, but the state passes through state money to us based on the size of our county, so that's a flexible fund source. The other program is called the State Transportation Improvement Program. That is when the state collects gas taxes, they collect it and then they distribute it to each county based on population and how many highway lane miles you have in your county. So every 2 years we get that amount and then we program it towards regional projects as well. And so that's a big part of Measure A that currently is being held in a reserve for the Santa Barbara Highway 101 High Occupancy Vehicle Project. And we'll talk about that policy today and get your feedback. But the combination of Measure A and the regional funding has been important for us to go to the state and federal government and ask for additional money for delivery. Any questions on that part? Okay. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the framework for Measure A. Measure A, when we presented to the voters for approval on the ballot, we presented the ordinance and investment plan. The ordinance and investment plan you can sort of think of like as federal and state law. So it tells Sbcag and local partners what we're required to do with Measure A, whether it's the strategic plan or local delivery. And then we present that information to your board for feedback, and then we present additional information to the public so they know that we're delivering on Measure A. So that's the first circle up at the top. And it also includes all the named projects that we have to deliver by 2040. The next tier of documents, the first one is the strategic plan, which we're talking about today. You can think of the strategic plan as the regional transportation plan that Sbcag is required to do by the federal and state government. So that lays out all of the projects that we're required to do and the sequencing and the prioritization and how we're going to pay for those projects and in which year. So you got the federal and state law with the investment plan and ordinance, and then you have the RTP with the strategic plan. We're required to update the strategic plan every 5 years. The last update was in 2020. And then the next document is the program of projects. An example document that I can share with you is called the Federal Transportation Improvement Program that your board approves every 2 years. That tells the public how our region is spending federal money on each project. So the program of projects we present to your board on an annual basis. What happens is we present revenue estimates to you based on HDL that shows how much money we have over 5 years. We share that with local partners, and then we develop the regional program. They develop the local, and then we present to you typically in April or May on the program of projects, and then you approve it, and then we distribute the funding. And then finally, another important document that our agency prepares is called the Measure A Annual Report, which Lauren leads, and that shows the successes and accomplishments of Measure A on an annual basis, and you'll be receiving an update on the annual report to your board in the next month or two. So these are the 4 major documents that we use at Sbcag to promote delivery and to show the public that we're delivering on Measure A. Okay, next slide, please. In terms of what we presented to the voters back in 2008, at that time, we were noticing that congestion on Highway 101 in Santa Barbara County on the south coast was increasing and increasing due to the bottleneck on 101. So we worked with Caltrans and local partners on developing a multimodal corridor plan, and that multimodal corridor plan said that in order to relieve that congestion, we need to have what is a policy called the lane and the train. And so it was completing the gap on US 101 with the high occupancy vehicle lane or carpool lane, and then also implementing passenger rail service from Ventura County up to Santa Barbara to provide an additional option for people so they didn't have to drive. And then additionally, there's also peak hour transit service that we do in partnership with Ventura County Transportation Commission. And then we're also looking at closing gaps on the California Coastal Trail. So that's where you get the multimodal corridor solution for relieving congestion. So then we took that and used that as the framework for presenting to the voters for the renewal of Measure A. We knew what we needed to do to relieve congestion as the #1 regional priority, and then we took money off the top. Back then in 2008, that was $140 million, and said that we'd go out and get federal and state money to get the rest done, which we have been doing, and I'll cover that in a second. After that, you'll see on the graphic there, we bifurcated the balance of Measure A. So off the top, it was 13.3% as the #1 priority for Measure A. And then after that, North County developed their own set of investment plan priorities in the regional program for the North County. And then South Coast had their share at the same amount for their own priorities as well. And we presented that to voters, and that helped us get 79% approval of Measure A. At that time, for transportation sales tax measures, we were the 4th highest ever in the state for a transportation sales tax measure, so that's another thing that we're proud of. So that just shows you all of the work that we put in with the development of the investment plan and going to the voters with that solution. Next slide, please. This is a pie chart to give you an idea of the overall Measure A picture and the types of projects that are eligible and receiving funding from Measure A. I mean, so you see the blue slice is dedicated highways. Another part of the solution or the presentation to the voters was making sure that there was a significant portion for local agencies for local control. And so that's included as a carryover from Measure D. So in the pie chart, you can see that almost 60% of Measure A funding is going to local agencies for local priorities. And then after that, we break down the funding by rail, bus, and alternative transportation, which includes bicycle pedestrian projects and transportation demand management. Next slide, please. And then what we did was we took the next part, so you can see that I talked about the 43% for north and south each. These pie charts reflect the priorities for both the north and the south. So you see on the North County that 77% of the money is going to local agencies for local priorities. And then after that, we have highway projects, rail and alternative, bus and alternative transportation in North County. On the South Coast, there is a different approach to using the Measure A funding. 60% is to local agencies. 5% is for rail, which was that peak hour passenger rail service I mentioned. That's just for the South Coast. And then the balance is for buses and alternative transportation. Next slide, please. Okay, I mentioned how we're experiencing growth in Measure A, so we're excited about that, but also mindful of any changes in the future. So back then, we thought we'd generate 1.05 billion over the 30 years, or about 35 million per year. We are looking now at about 1.6 billion through the balance of Measure A through 2040. So that's a significant increase of about 50%. When we look to the future, our HDL firm has proposed that we'll see annual growth at about 2.8 to 3.1% through 2040. So, and then each year we update that, and we're actually monitoring regularly just to make sure that we're not going to have any significant negative setbacks. Obviously, positive gains are good, and then the way when we approve the program or projects, that money just gets distributed to local agencies and to projects by percentage. So the positive is good. We reached an all-time high with collection of Measure A at about 54.9 million in the most recent fiscal year. So that's good news. And actually, if you go back real quick. So the line chart shows you actual collected revenues so far for Measure A. So we saw increases through 2017, and then an increase, and then that dip was the pandemic. And then since then, we've noticed sizable increases each year. Thank you. So that concludes the first part of my presentation. I was going to hand it off to Fred Luna to cover the next part. If there are any questions for me before we hand it off.
Directors, any questions? Do we have any correct questions from directors that are remote?
I have a question. Chair
Director
Lavina.
Nelson?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. My understanding is back in 2008 when this was, contemplated, and then 2010 when it was approved, it was set out as 140 million off the top. And when we talked about state and federal dollars that this would be leveraged for, those were going to be new state and federal dollars. And so I just want to make sure I understand correctly. When did the percentage as the way to allocate, when did that come about? Because I don't think that was an initial initiative. And then when did we change the policy to use the money, the regional state and federal dollars that we were already getting to the region for that project? Because I think there's some concern that, the project has gotten more expensive down in the 101 widening, and there's been a need for additional funds. And so that's where we tapped into some things that would have normally gone throughout the county. And we've really starved many of our communities that would typically get our STIP and STIP funds. And then on top of that, we're looking at increasing that allocation. So it's always been a concern of mine, and I'm going to continue to be on that track. So can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yes. So Director Nelson, through the chair, Measure A was approved in 2008. So we had the percentages in place for the structure of Measure A. So the 140 million that we mentioned is the 13.3%. So the 13.3% plus the 43.3 for each are fixed percentages to get to the 100%, which we have never changed since Measure A passed. When the board did approve the first Measure A strategic plan, that's when the board adopted the policy of using the regional funding of RSTP and regional gas tax funding. So that's when that happened. Regarding the 101 project, the project has changed since it got approved in 2008. Couple reasons. The first reason is that when we first were going to deliver the 101 HOV project, and Fred can add on, we were just looking at completing the gap on 101. So adding the main line as a new facility, right? Since then, with our partnership with the state of California and Caltrans, and an increase in funding that they have through the State Highway Operation Protection Program, that's the Caltrans pot of money to do asphalt and maintenance projects. the project has changed because now we're adding new pavement on top of the facility throughout the corridor to make sure that we have a pavement that will last for 40 years. And so that was part of the change. And also, we've had local projects that we've added to it for coastal development permits. And those have been the active transportation projects that we've been including with Measure A. Those projects have actually helped us leverage Senate Bill 1 funding because we're showing the state that we're not just doing the HOV project, we're doing the transit, the rail, and then the bike ped improvements as well. So that's helped us be competitive for the state funding. So that's a little bit of history on the evolution of the project.
Thank you.
Sarkis, 2 questions for me. Has anybody else, any other counties become self-help counties since we've?
Yes.
Yeah.
Through the chair, I think there's at least 6 or 7 counties, and 2 of them are on the Central Coast. So that's Monterey and Santa Cruz have been self-help. And then Stanislaus and Merced counties, our executive director
Finally, right?
Yeah.
Good, you got it.
passed the measure in Merced county. So there have been quite a few.
Okay, good. And then who did we use? Hopefully it wasn't the same group that we're using now, consultant, that projected 35 million a year.
Okay. So we did not have HDL
Okay.
helping us. Fred may remember. I think that may have been
fine.
an.
I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
If they projected 35 and we're getting 60 or 58, I don't want to use them going forward. So.
Yes. Well, that's noted. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Any other questions from anybody? All right, let's move to
Okay,
Fred's
thank you.
portion.
All right, thank you, directors, and good morning. Continuing with the presentation, so I have about 5 slides, and I'll pick up where Sarkis left off, talking about the revenue, but I think the focus of this slide is really talking about how revenue growth over time as compared to cost escalations. This is a question that we've received from board members and the Citizens Oversight Committee. We think it's important to show that. And so the blue line that you see is an index of construction costs from the California Construction Cost Index compiled by the Engineering News Record. So that shows the growth over time. You can see in recent years on the far end that has grown fairly fast, and we've seen that in projects, increased costs on projects going forward. But the orange line, as Sarkis indicated, is our robust revenue growth. Just as an aside to speak to the question of Director Lavanino, I think the 35 million was based on what we were actually collecting under Measure D, and then just we didn't bother or look at projecting it out for a future year. It was just like what would be an annual amount, knowing that it would grow over time. And so that was kind of the 2010 amount based on what we were actually collecting at the time. And then that's kind of a good segue here. So we're picking up in 10-11 where Measure D ended and Measure A started. And then so the bar chart is showing the the incremental amounts, and then the line chart is showing the cumulative amounts. I think the main takeaway here is that revenue growth is outpacing cost escalation. So I think that was the main question that we were trying to address. And I'll move on. Next slide. Okay. So we have a series of slides that talk about the 3 major programs in the Measure A investment plan. I think that were already referenced. We have the Highway 101 project. We have the South Coast priorities, as Sarkis was mentioning, and the North County program. So starting with the Highway 101 project, as was just asked by Director Nelson, the 140 million was based on the fixed amount back in 2010 of 1.05 billion, but it was 13.33%. So like Sarkis mentioned, that has been part of the investment plan since the beginning. And so applying that percent to the projected revenue growth that you've seen in the charts shows that we would be collecting for that project approximately $209 million. Next slide. So same type of math for the South Coast Measure A projected revenues. So the South Coast priorities. So we only have two named projects in the South Coast. We have the Carpinteria circulation improvements and the Goleta overpass project. And you can see the 2008 amount there, 1 million for Carpinteria. They've already implemented a number of projects in the city of Carpinteria with that funding. That's projected to grow over the 30 years of Measure A to about 1.5 million. And then the Goleta allocation would be 7 million, but approximately 10.4 million out to 2040. 10.5. Next slide. So North County projects. So I think what's important here is to really break these projects into three major categories. You can see that the number of highway projects and regional name projects that are in this program. Many of them early on in Measure A were already under development, and Caltrans was working on them. And so SBCAG's role in those particular projects was as contributing Measure A funds to help match other state funding and getting them over the top. And then we also have a number of projects from our smaller local entities that are circulation projects that give the local agencies like Buellton, Guadalupe, and Solvang maximum flexibility to implement smaller projects through a co-op agreement with SBCAG. And then we have other projects like the Highway 246 passing lane, the Highway 246 Robinson Bridge, and the Santa Maria interchanges. And so 246 passing lanes was split into two separate phases. So a portion of that was completed. You can see that that originally had 20 million. And the projected revenue growth for that is almost 30 million with that 50% bump. And so we actually spent about 22 million. So on that project to get phase one done, but we haven't yet started any work related to what would be a phase two project on Highway 246. The city of Santa Maria is working on several of the interchange projects like Highway 101, 135, Highway 101 Betaravia, and then several other ones are already complete, like the Union Valley Parkway and the Santa Maria River Bridge. The only other project that I didn't talk about was some recent activity, and this is one of the things we'll be documenting in the strategic plan is some recent partnerships we've entered into with Caltrans to move the Highway 246 San Ynez River Bridge, the Robinson Bridge, into the SHOP program. And so we're able to contribute money. Caltrans has made it part of a larger project that they're working on. Same type of effort in Highway 166. Many of you are familiar with that recent efforts that we have gone through to get the Guadalupe area improvements part of a larger Caltrans project from Santa Maria to Guadalupe. And so that shows you where we stand on those North County regional projects. Next slide. Okay, the last slide I had was really to talk about, and this is really a conversation that we've had in the North County because we've completed quite a bit of projects, is what might be the estimated cost savings program balance. And so this is taking into account recent approval actions by the board to agree to contribute funding to Highway 166 to the Caltrans project. So you saw on the previous slide that the North County estimated revenue over the 30 years is about 122.4 million. We've spent a little over 37 million to date. The board made previous actions in about 2014-15 to approve an additional 9.3 million from the cost savings. And then we have an estimated forecast of expenditures of 58 million. So that will leave at the end of the program about $17 million in the North County program. So as we're estimating right now, and we'll have a discussion in the strategic plan about that. The last thing before I hand it over to Jackie is for the board's consideration. One of the policy items that we want the board, or if they have any direction in particular, is that these are estimates. We're only halfway through the program, and so 15 years of a 30-year program. So we've been cautious about programming the entire amount of the forecast. We've used, in some cases, maybe 90% of the total. So for like a project like 101, rather than the full 209 million, it's more like we're gonna commit 180 million, at least for now, until we get further along. And then, that's kind of been the idea right now, and the same for some of the other regional projects that have required contributions. So if the board has thoughts on that, we certainly would like to receive that. And I'll hand it over to Jackie, or take any questions maybe first before I hand it
Any
over.
questions for Mr. Luna from the directors? From our remote directors? Any questions for Mr. Luna? Okay, we'll go to Jackie.
Yes, Chair. I've got a question. This is King.
Director King?
On the chart that you show about the Measure A funds, on the 22, 23, those 2 years, is that orange line, is that because you have, the Measure A funds have not caught up yet? Yeah, that's the one. On the 23rd, 22, 23, it shows only like a 32% or something. Is that because the Measure A funds have not caught up yet?
You see that, Sar? Because I'm not sure.
Slide
So
10
that
on the
last
far
year,
right
you're
is what
talking,
he's
Director
talking
King,
about.
you're talking about that last year of revenue growth?
Yeah, see, it says 21, 22, and it's at about 72%, and then for 22, 23, it says 32%. Is that because those funds have not caught up yet, or that was a big deficit there?
I think
I see it increase. I think it's cumulative around 70%, but Sarkis, do you have those figures in front
The
of
bar is showing the increase from the prior year,
you? Mm-hmm.
and the line is what we actually collected. So you see the difference between 21 and 22 to 2023. It doesn't, the line doesn't go up at a steeper angle. It's just pretty flat. So the bar at the far right is the increase, which was
Yeah.
less,
That's
1%
right. So
increase. And so the line is showing how much we collected, which was $55.9 million. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you. Jackie, you ready to start?
Yep. So, hi everyone, Jackie Mata, Transportation Planner in the Programming Division at Sbcag, and so I'll be going over the upcoming strategic plan update and then some things that we want your board to consider. Next slide. So the strategic plan is the master document that shows how we will deliver the named projects in the investment plan. And so it is a requirement that it be updated every 5 years. And the last update was in 2020. So the purposes of the strategic plan are to define the scope, cost, and schedule of each of the projects, and then identify critical issues or risks to delivering these projects. It also layouts the implementation schedule for the named projects, and it consolidates policies and procedures adopted by the Sbcag board to implement the investment plan. And then something else that's not on there is that it also documents investment plan amendments. So the strategic plan and the investment plan kind of talk to each other and have to sync to each other. Next slide. So this slide shows project delivery priorities, and this is from 2020, which was the last update. So with this next update, we will either confirm or update these priorities, and so we're working with the local agencies that implement these projects, but then we'll also gather your input as we move along with this process. And the projects that were complete, you can see in that first column, it has a completion year, and then the light orange cells show pre-construction years, and the dark orange cells show construction years, which is usually where our Measure A funds are programmed for those projects. Next slide, please. And so, yeah, these are some things we'd like your board to consider as we update the strategic plan. And so we need to update near the end of the 2025 calendar year. We need to focus on updating cost and funding and schedule for each of the projects so that they're up to date. And then by summer of next year, we'll also know about the Senate Bill 1 Cycle 4 funding and how it will impact the delivery of the remaining regional projects. And the one important thing to consider, and Sarkis will also talk about this later, is that in this next update, we'll like to analyze the viability of delivering the remaining regional projects. And this is based on some state policies. And so we will also need to consider the use of RSTP, or Regional Surface Transportation Program, and the STIP funds, so State Transportation Improvement Program funds, following the Senate Bill 1 Cycle 4 award. And yeah, just again, something to note, the scheduled approval in December 2025, following the notification of those awards. So I'll pause there to see if there's any questions for me, and then, yeah, Sarkis will take over the next couple of slides.
Sarkis, are you gonna address like what's left on the 101? Is that what you're talking about? Okay, I'll hold my question. Anybody off-site directors? Questions? Okay, we'll move on back to Sarkis for the.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Jackie, and directors. I hope the mic is still working for me. So you've gotten a lot of information on where we are with Measure A. We've done a lot of great work on delivering the promises to the voters, and that's thanks to your leadership for giving us the tools in the toolbox to do that. We're almost there. There's still a little bit left. But you've seen how much has been completed. Staff is mindful of how the Santa Barbara US 101 corridor has driven a lot of this, and so our goal every day, we think, our dream, hopefully soon, is just to fully fund the corridor, and then we can address the remaining projects. Director or Chair Lavanino, you asked the question. So the final funding piece that we need, we are working with Caltrans right now to develop our nomination to headquarters to submit applications to the state for Senate Bill 1 Cycle 4. Applications are going to be due this December. So we're looking at the final projects that we need, which is the final segment, HOV segment in Santa Barbara, the Cabrillo Rail Bike Ped project, Santa Barbara East Side active transportation, and then electric buses and zero-emission vehicle charging. That is the same suite of projects that we submitted to the California Transportation Commission a couple years ago for Cycle 3, and because they didn't have enough money to fully fund us, they gave us partial funding. So that's the final package that we're going to submit, and we're going to have more information on that to your board in the coming months. So that's the final funding piece that we're going to submit, and then we'll find out in June of 2025 on the full funding award from the California Transportation Commission.
What's the dollar amount that we're short right now?
Approximately $130 million. And so your board last couple months, thankfully, submitted our regional gas tax nomination to the CTC, which was about $20 million. So that helped us reduce the ask, which is going to make us more competitive. So thank you for that. Excuse me. And then we'll submit the final funding for the $130 million.
And what's just the pavement? What's just the corridor? I mean, without the ancillary.
And Fred can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the HOV segment is 90 million, and then the other projects make up the 130.
Sounds right.
Okay.
Any questions? Or
So this is an important slide. Do you have a question?
No.
Okay, sorry. So the world has changed a couple times while Measure A has been in existence. We are thankful that the state passed Senate Bill 1, which gave us the funding opportunities to leverage the outside money with the Measure A, which we've been successful in 2 rounds of funding from Senate Bill 1. Something that has changed since the last Measure A strategic plan are a couple state policies that we think are going to impact our ability to deliver on. I'm confident that we can deliver on the final 101 funding piece. We're going to know in the next couple months on that. But there are the remaining regional projects in North County that we have to be mindful of, that these policies impact us. The first one is a state law called Senate Bill 743. Senate Bill 743 is a state policy that under the California Environmental Quality Act, before SB 743, a regional or a local agency had to look at the impacts of transportation projects on the environment. And so there was a prior measure called levels of service. So levels of service, not to get too bureaucratic on you, it's just hours of delay to get from one point to another point. So something that was level of service of A, great work, you know, you're in good shape with moving vehicles. Level of service F, fail, you're not doing great. So the state said that level of service analysis was not a good way for determining the impacts of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in California, and that there is a new tool to use, and that's called Senate Bill 743, and that measures the impacts of transportation projects using vehicle miles traveled. So how long does it take for somebody to get from point A to point B by distance? And so they felt that that metric was a better way of seeing how a transportation project impacts our climate and equity goals in California. Just to be honest with you, there's been a lot of pushback from local agencies with using vehicle miles traveled compared to levels of service, especially the tool that the state would like to use. And so there's a whole lot of discussion going on there, which I'm not going to go into, but that's just the reality that we have SB 743, and we have to evaluate project impacts using vehicle miles traveled. That could impact our ability to fund and deliver the remaining Santa Maria interchange projects in North County. Our view of those projects is that they're not what's called inducing demand. They're not increasing vehicle miles traveled. We think that they're more of operational improvements at those interchanges, and we're not adding capacity to the state highway system. We still, once we go through the process of an approved environmental document, we're still going to have to look at VMT. We're also working with the city of Santa Maria, notably on the Highway 101-135 interchange project, looking at some of the other elements that are included at the interchange, such as electric vehicle charging, or adding carpools, or adding additional capacity for bicyclists and pedestrians to cross over 101 at the interchange. We feel as though that we're going to be offsetting any vehicle miles traveled for the project with that. We still have to go through the process, but we did want to elevate that risk to the board with Senate Bill 743. The other two that are up on the slide are the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure and the Caltrans System Investment Strategy, which are related to each other. So the Governor Newsom signed 2 executive orders related to climate change and looking at how California invests state competitive funding for transportation projects in California. And so CAPTI, or the Climate Action Plan, has a series of policies in place that focus on equity and climate goals, and then making sure that California goes all electric by 2040. So that's, excuse me, that's a big impact. So that was the policy. And then what's happening now is that we have the implementation document called CSIS. CSIS, so the state wants to align state transportation funding with those equity and climate goals. Under CAPTI, what CSIS does is then Caltrans is taking any project that a region wants to co-nominate on the state highway system, i.e. us with Santa Barbara US 101 or the Santa Maria interchange projects. We're going through a process where we're monitoring this and providing input to Caltrans headquarters. this could impact which projects the state picks as a co-nomination for Senate Bill 1 competitive funding. So that's another risk associated with the remaining projects in Measure A. We are advocating with other regions of our size. We are cognizant of the state climate goals that the state has, but we're also mindful that we have a lot of projects that we've been working on over the last few years that started before a lot of these policies began. And so we're just trying to ensure that one size does not fit all in terms of measuring these projects. This type of policy definitely probably favors more urban areas that have higher densities and have transit systems that are more robust and can, excuse me, support the state goals as of now. We're just trying to make sure that our projects continue to not only be eligible, competitive for the state funding. So we're working in partnership with Caltrans on that. I think we're making good progress on these state goals, and they've been listening to us, and there have been some changes recently which we think will allow us to get to the finish line, but we wanted to raise these policies to your board just so you're aware of them. And then we'll get more information in terms of the impacts in the next 6 months, which we'll share an update to the board. That was pretty heavy stuff, so I'll stop there to see if there are any questions.
Capti CSIS, yes, new language here.
Chair
Right.
Lavanino,
Yes.
Director Nelson's had his hand raised
Okay,
for quite a bit.
Director Nelson.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to go back actually to that question that Director Lavanino had about the 101 widening and what we have left in the balance. Are we assuming the 130 million left that we need, with assuming that we're going to put 203 million in there from Measure A? Or is that, because I heard Fred talk about that we might only program 180 million just to be conservative because we don't know if we actually hit those numbers. So what,
Yes,
what
so
assumption are we using for Measure A?
Director Nelson, through the chair, so we're using that 180 million or so to then leverage the final 120 million, and then at that point, assuming we get the funding from the state, that would be the full funding for it, and then we'll be mindful of any changes to project costs once we actually get ready for construction for the final piece. But yeah, there would be a little bit just held back from the 204.
And then as we get to some of these future projects, or actually let me stay on the 101. So once we're fully funded, we get that 120 million. Will we still be allocating STIP and RSTIP funds to that project, or will that then cease?
So Director Nelson, through the chair, that's one of the questions that we're asking for board feedback with this update. The policy under the current strategic plan says that those two funding sources will be held in the reserve until completion of the corridor, just because we're not sure what the transportation construction climate is going to be in 2 years. We'll know the full funding in July of 2025. So we're, some time away from that. Things could change. And then, like I said, we're holding back some Measure A, but then it's up to the board to give us direction on, do you want to keep reserving the RSTP and the regional gas tax for the 101 until it's fully funded or completed? The other question that we have for your board is that in the strategic plan for the remaining regional named projects, the Santa Maria interchange projects, they are also going to need outside funding for delivery. So staff is committed to pursuing those state and federal grants for the Santa Maria projects that we did for 101. But the costs are still greater than what we have for Measure A. So that's something that we also need to think about with the board as well.
So I guess my last question might be helpful for me and probably other directors. Before we did the 101 widening, what was our STIP and STIP? I mean, how did that affect local municipalities and areas? Because most of us have never been in office and got those back to our our communities. What did that look like in the past, and how would that benefit
Yep.
our individual jurisdictions?
So,
That goes back out there.
So thank you for the question, Director Nelson, and through the chair. Before the first Measure A strategic plan, the regional gas tax funding was being used for regional projects and some local projects. And then the RSTP, the Regional Surface Transportation Program funding, was being provided to local agencies. So each year we get the amount. It's about 6 million right now. We give 1.8 million directly to local partners based on population. The balance of the RSTP is held in that reserve. That balance that you can think of before was we were conducting a call for projects every 2 or 3 years for local agencies to submit projects. So a lot of those projects were probably like local road improvements and then active transportation projects. So that money was made available to local agencies. And then once the reserve policy happened, the 1.8 still goes to local agencies. The balance was going into the reserve. And then the regional gas tax money we were using for regional projects.
The local jurisdictions now are having to dip into their other road funds to do those types of projects.
So the local agencies are using local funding for those projects. Measure A did create the South Coast to North County Safe Routes to School and Bike Ped programs. So some of those projects were being funded through those Measure A pots. But yes, local agencies were having to rely on other local funding for the traditional local pavement.
So, and that, and I think in at least the unincorporated area where the county has to deal with this, that's, required us to sometimes affect our pavement condition because we're having to spend those funds on other projects that would, potentially go to pavement issues. So I think that's important for everybody to understand that may be the choice that we're making by continuing to hold those funds in reserve.
Director Rouse.
Thank you. Sarkis, you mentioned something I actually appreciated, which was the one-size-fits-all between LOS and going to VMT. So my understanding is VMT also is trying to incentivize housing at transit intersection centers and whatnot, but also looking to diminish the impacts of CEQA on the approval of those projects. Do I have that correct?
I'm not the CEQA expert when it comes to the impact of 743 on the housing projects. I don't know if somebody, Mike, wants to talk about that. But to your first question, Director Rouse, yes, the SB 743 is looking at aligning housing with transportation.
Right, and I appreciate that because I also appreciate knowing that urban versus rural areas are not once again, not one size fits all, especially when you think about North and South County.
Yeah, essentially, Director Rouse, the Senate Bill 743 was passed in 2014, and it changed the transportation impact portion of CEQA from congestion to vehicle miles traveled. And that's for all CEQA analyses that have a transportation impact. So if you're building an office building or housing, and in a CEQA document you're analyzing the transportation impact, you're analyzing vehicle miles traveled, and then you attempt to mitigate to the extent possible. And if you can fully mitigate, then you fully mitigate. Otherwise, statement of overriding considerations would pass if the project value exceeds the environmental impact. But yes, it's beyond transportation projects. It's all projects.
Thank you.
Any other questions from directors? I have just a couple. So the application we're doing in December to the CTC, is that a joint application with Caltrans, like our last?
Yes, so we're seeking Chair Levin, we're seeking a joint nomination with Caltrans District 5 and then ultimately Caltrans headquarters for both the Solutions for Congested Corridors and Trade Corridor Enhancement Program. We are submitting a final nomination in February, so we're going to know in March or April on the final co-nomination status. But so far, District 5 is supporting us to reach the co-nomination.
Okay, and then, just off the top of your head, can you give me just ballpark, what have we received in state and federal funding on the corridor?
Oh, in the corridor total, I think we received, you back to phase 1?
Yeah, all the way.
Okay, all right, so we're probably at about $800 million.
Right on. Okay. It's a good talking point. Okay. And then you kind of asked a little bit, well, we're just doing questions now. I'll give you what I think about the reserve later. But anybody else? Okay, let's go to public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's still more? Okay.
Yeah, my bad.
We're not
I'm
done
sorry.
yet. And if you thought that
We
was
had-
good.
We said what hour, sorry.
No.
Okay, so this is the final section. It's the investment plan and a requested amendment to the investment plan. So the nice thing about the investment plan is that it allows us to make changes that obviously require approval by your board, 2/3 approval, but we do have that opportunity. We last did an amendment for Santa Barbara Metropolitan Transit District in 2020. That one was to change eligibility for their transit capital program to include operations. And then we've also done amendments to add additional North County projects. So it's nothing new to your board. It's happened before, but it does require 2 hearings and then 2/3 approval by your board. Next slide, please. So, as part of the strategic plan update, we've met with all the local agencies that have remaining regional projects, and we met with City of Goleta. The City of Goleta has a named project in the South Coast program called the Goleta Overpass Project. And so this was intended to be a new vehicular overcrossing on the western end of Goleta, somewhere between like Stork and then Stoke Canyon, so on the west side. And the city, it's been in our Measure A investment plan for a few years now. The city has been working with their city council on it. The costs for the project have increased since the project was first presented in the Measure A investment plan back in 2008. And so the costs have increased. The city did look at other types of crossing, like active transportation or a bike ped crossing instead of vehicular. But the costs have gone up. The city presented a letter that's included in the staff report that was approved by their city council. Their request is the Goleta Overpass project is one of the projects waiting for 101 to be completed and for regional funding. The city is requesting that the Measure A funding, so that's in 27, 28, 28, 29. They are cognizant of the regional funding that was associated with the project. Their request is to move the project up in Measure A to fiscal year 24, 25, 26, or the next fiscal year, and to have that roughly $9 million distributed over 2 fiscal years. So advance the money, split it out over 2 years to make the funds available for other local projects that are not in the Measure A investment plan, to use that funding for those projects. And so the city's request did acknowledge that with the request and getting the Measure A advance, that they would not necessarily receive the regional funding. And then it's going to be up to the city on, what they do with the Goleta Overpass project with, city resources, but it would be removed from the Measure A investment plan. With that, I'm done talking. And so we do, next step. By the way, we do have the City of Goleta Public Works Director here if there are any questions related to the City of Goleta request. I'm not done talking. Okay, all right, so next steps. So today was the check-in. It was the first bite at the apple. So we're looking forward to any questions or feedback that you have. And then if there's anything that we didn't cover today, I let us know. And then we'll come back to your board probably next month. We'll go back to TTAC to let them know what the board direction was. We'll start preparing any Measure A investment plan amendments per board direction, which we'll receive today. And then we're just going to start, plugging away and getting the document ready for review by your board and the public. So with that, that concludes staff's presentation. Thank you for indulging us on this presentation today, but there is a lot of information that we wanted to share, and we thank the board for your leadership with Measure A. Thank you.
Excellent. Any questions? Somebody's at the door, but. Any questions before we go to public comment from our offsite directors? Joan, Director Hartman?
I had a couple of questions for the Galitas Public Works Director. Is that
Excellent.
now?
Yeah,
or?
sure. Let's do that now.
I get a lot of questions about the overpass, so I'd just like a little bit more information. What issue was the overpass originally designed to address?
Chair Lavanino and Director Hartman, I happen to have been with the county way back when, in the mid-2000s, when I think those ideas were first starting to get thought about with that project. As I recall from my own personal experience, was that the project was thought about by the county before the city incorporated to provide a pedestrian overcrossing that would really address an issue that was being generated by the use of Gersh Park, the large regional park in the area, and pedestrians needing to get to the north side of the freeway. And unfortunately, there were some unfortunate accidents at the time. Some pedestrians were hit on the freeway, and I think that really generated the idea to begin with. So if I might, I would say that the project isn't going away. What we intend to do is continue to think about that from a City of Goleta standpoint, and how we would deliver that project. And what we're really looking at is just a timing of funding and that kind of thing.
Was there any other funding set aside other than this funding for that project?
Through the chair, yes. There was the Measure A funding, and then there was also STIP funding and other regional funding that was for that project. As Sarkis mentioned, the city is acknowledging that some of that regional funding that's been reserved for that project would probably go away at this time. However, the city has actually worked on this project in the past. It is not being worked on currently. It's not within our priorities with our Public Works capital improvement program, but the city has invested approximately $3 to $4 million in the project in the past, looking at alternatives, that kind of thing. So the city has invested some of its own funding in the past, and certainly the project will remain in our capital improvement program.
So it started as a bike ped, and then it expanded to include vehicles, and then it seems to have come back to its original idea. Could you explain that change?
Through the chair, I actually don't know that part of the story myself, of how it sort of morphed from a ped to a vehicular and pedestrian and bicycle type facility. But we've had direction from the City Council in the past to Public Works and our capital improvement program that we should be looking at a bicycle and pedestrian only facility as we continue to move that project forward and keep that as an alternative. So yes, we continue to think about how we would deliver something like a pedestrian facility.
Right, and what I've heard is that the neighbors where the overpass would end are open to a bike ped, but they're not that eager to have vehicles. Is that correct?
Through the chair, I have not actually spoken to the residents in that area. I'm still relatively new with the city. I've been there 6 years, and we really haven't done that type of public outreach in the recent past. But I suspect, I think it's a fair statement to say that a facility such as a roadway facility coming across the freeway in that area and of El Encanto Heights of Goleta would be something the public would be very interested in, may have some comments on.
Thank you for giving me that background. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Okay, let's go to public comment if we have any.
Chair Lavanina, we have 2 requests for public comment. First is Mr. Richard Foster, followed by Ms. Karen Lovelace.
Thank you for sitting through all that.
You guys are quicker than some other places I've gone. My name is Richard Foster. I live in Goleta. I talked with Robert Nesbitt, our city manager, a while back, and he said flat out this bridge was never going to be built. He may deny that because it was only him and I in the room, but this is not a priority of the city. This is not a desire to amend the overpass. It's an attempt to kill it. The city of Goleta has used Sbcag as their personal piggy bank to tie up $7 million, while they never seem to have actually had any intention of building the bridge. Originally, the pedestrian bridge was $7 million. Numbers got up. They decided, well, maybe we should look at a bridge. The bridge got to $40 million, and basically back in 2010, shortly after announcing they were going to do this, the project died. The city says the project cost is significant. Well, in the recent CIP presentation by the city council's staff, the overpass was projected to cost $60 million. But instead of moving forward with this project, they moved forward with the circulation project in Old Town Goleta at a cost of $65 to $70 million, which includes the stated goal of choking down Hollister Avenue to the point where it's a destination and not a throughway to get to Costco from Old Town. They also say there's no viable location. Well, back in 2010, the city put out 3 places where you could actually put this up there, and that's available at Newshawk on February 11th, 2010. But the city's acted in bad faith with you to tie your hands, to force you to kill this project. With the city staff's recommendation, the city rezoned 7264 Kyriel to high-density housing, which is one of the approaches. And on the south side, they approved the Elwood Station Road project of not the project, but the rezoning for 140 units, which would block the access to come down from the overcrossing. So basically, they've already decided you can't approve a bridge even if you wanted to, unless they change their housing element. The overpass was and is a needed circulation problem. A decade ago, Goleta's former Public Works Director, Rosemarie Gaglione, said, assuming the city continues to build out Stork and Hollister, Stork and Hollister is going to be gridlocked. We need that bridge. And believe me, we've built a lot since then. We've built hundreds of units. We've built shopping centers. And now we're proposing hundreds and hundreds of houses in Goleta, not to mention the possibility of 800 to 1,000 homes up at the other end of Glen Annie. The overpass would ease congestion on 101, but there would maybe possibly some pushback from members of the Brandon community. I think if you want to switch back and go to a pedestrian bicycle one, you would get full support because you're going to have a lot of new students who have to get across that freeway to get Dos Pueblos. You know, a lot of people want to get south, and I live on Del Norte. Electric bikes zoom up and down, and they're all using Glen Annie historic sidewalks as a way to get down there. Tell the city if they want the money, switch their goals and go with this. But if they don't want to do this at all, putting the money into Old Town circulation where they actually want to choke traffic is not supporting the goals of Measure A. It's not increasing circulation. If you're concerned about public safety, whatnot, they should build a pedestrian overpass, or they should just give up the money and let some jurisdiction that will actually build what they told you they wanted to build go ahead and have the money. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience. A log jumped in front of me yesterday. My name is Karen Lovelace, and I'm a resident of Elancano Heights in Western Goleta. I've lived in this neighborhood since before cityhood, before Camino Real Marketplace, before UCSB's enrollment explosion. I was at the meeting some 30 years ago when Wilson Hubble, who's the former Santa Barbara County Senior Planner, Public Works, came to our neighborhood and spoke to our neighborhood about the need for the 101 overcrossing, which is about half a mile west of Glen Annie Stork Overpass. Since 2010, when the overpass project, the full car overpass project for Western Goleta was endorsed by the city, there have been hundreds of new housing units and commercial space such as Hollister Village added to the city. City staff predicted that without a new overcrossing, the Glen Annie Stork Hollister area would be gridlocked. They were right. The south side of the location is the busiest retail on the south coast, and the north side is home to Dos Pueblos High School. Residents need a safe route to connect north and south. Now the city is rezoned for hundreds of high-density units on the north and south side of the 101 freeway. Most of these will need use of that intersection and freeway interchange, exacerbating the problem. Adding to the future chaos is the county's consideration of 800 to 1,000 new housing units at the north end of Glen Annie. 14 years is enough time to get something done, but sadly the city staff and council never made this overcrossing a priority. The proposal goes back to the formation of the city when the developers of Camino Real Marketplace gave the county money toward this congestion relieving project. They recognized it as a tool to alleviate congestion. Goleta currently has many grant-subsidized projects that are on hold. Seeing as the city of Goleta lacks a commitment to use this $9 million as promised, I suggest you let them go back to the plan for a pedestrian overcrossing. This would not solve the auto congestion at the 101. This would solve some of the auto congestion at the 101 interchange and give bikes, e-bikes, and pedestrians a safe route to the high school or south to the shopping areas. I would remind you that the Goleta Overpass was the only Measure A project in Goleta. Sending the grant money to Project Connect, which narrows Hollister Avenue, only will be used to create congestion. That'd be a classic example of throwing good money after bad. Please keep the promise to the voters regarding this 101 overcrossing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to bring it back to the board. Director Perotti.
Okay. You know, when I have comments, I want to also make sure that it's clear that this is the first public hearing, and we will be having another one when we actually make a decision on this. And I want to also be clear that the request was unanimous by my fellow council members. But there was always, unfortunately, the letters makes it sound like we want to kill the project on the council, and that's not our intent. Our intent is to use the money on an existing project in Old Town. Maybe, possibly, I would think it would go to Equal Fowler, which will help with the circulation, but also it's going to help with the road, there'll be a roundabout, which will help with traffic. There's also going to be the businesses and neighbors in that area will be out of the flood zone, so it will help their insurance. So there's a lot of advantages of finishing a project that's already been started. And the 101 overcrossing, I'll have to say that I was very involved with it a little bit when it was at the county in Wilson-Hubbell. And it has changed from just pedestrian ped, and then later on it was determined that we should do vehicles as well, and then now we have a council that is looking definitely at just pedestrian ped access. But that project's not, it has a lot more work to do. We haven't worked on it, I think, in 7 to 8 years. So I think working with the community is important. I think the council needs to weigh in again. We've never really, there were several options on where it would begin on the south and where it would end on the north, and that never was made definite. So there's no decision made on that. So looking at that, and plus the cost, we just thought that it would be better to put funding to finish a project that we started before starting a brand new project that we have no funding for. So that's why the request came. But I do want to emphasize the importance of us. We all really would like to continue with that idea. We're very interested in continuing.
Okay. Do we have any other Comments from directors?
Chair Lavino?
Yeah, Director Nelson.
Yeah, thank you. A quick question about, would it be possible to still add additional projects? I know that Clete is asking for this, and I know that's what was mentioned here, but are there, you said that's kind of what goes on with one of these updates. So if there are projects that have come up in the last 5 or 10 years here that weren't originally contemplated, is this the mechanism to ask for those to be included?
So, Director Nelson, through the chair. Yes, so as long as there are resources available through any of the 3 Measure A sub-programs, the 101 probably not as much, but the North and the South, then yes, what we do is we use the tool in the toolbox to amend the Measure A investment plan to add projects like we've done before, and then that requires 2/3 approval by the board for including the projects.
Okay, and so what it would be like our Public Works Department in Santa Barbara County would reach out to Sbcag staff about a project that they might think would be appropriate.
Yes, then we would, Director Nelson through the chair, then yes, we would work with the County of Santa Barbara staff on that.
Thank you.
Sarkis, are you looking today for direction from this board regarding, I mean, to me, one of the critical pieces is what, the local, what used to be local and is now going to the 101, and what to do with that 6 million. Are you looking for direction today on what our priority is, or?
Yes, so we'd like the direction in terms of going through the plan update and then what your desire would be, and I'll defer to.
Yes, Mr. Chairperson, members of the board, that was one of the identified issues that we, as staff, we presented to you. So we would like to address that through this update and revisit that and confirm or change based on your direction. So those are the things that we had on, I don't know what slide it was, but we did list a few issues that we thought were pertinent. And if you concur with that, we'll proceed as we plan to do that.
Cool. Okay. Then I'll just give my 2 cents that I think once it's 100% funded, and I know, there's always, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but Measure A is also performing at a rate that we didn't anticipate, and we're already sitting in the North County on a $17 million, I don't want to say surplus because we don't know what's going to happen in the next 15 years. My vote would be that we would then now begin, once it's 100% funded, if we're lucky enough in the next cycle, that we would go back to the previous formula. And so that some of our jurisdictions can get back to addressing, the needs that we have. I think the promise to the voters has been made and delivered on. If it's 100% funded, we will at that point have spent, I think probably north of 200 million of our dollars. It's easy for me to go to North County though and tell people we spent 200 million. That's only 20% of the project. We received 80%. So I think the spirit of Measure A there is something we can make that argument. And I guess we're not going to, I don't know if anybody's going to weigh in on the Goleta issue now or wait till the next, when this comes back to us. What do you guys, are you looking for direction on that as well, or?
If we don't hear otherwise, we'll bring it back. So,
Okay.
So if you, yeah.
Well, I think it's always good to bring it back for more discussion. I'll just, personally, here's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about son of Measure A, right? So the reason why Measure A passed was because when we had Measure D, we delivered on Measure D, and we did what we told the people we were going to do. And that's why I got 2/3 vote on a tax increase. So I'm really hesitant to go away from any name projects because there were only a few in the South County. I mean, I'd feel the same way if it's in the North County. It's like, hey, these are the projects we told people we were going to do. And to get them to go back to the polls and approve whatever we're going to have to do 15 years from now, we're going to have to check off those items. And that's what kind of worries me about looking at the schedule in the North County. The big interchanges in Santa Maria aren't scheduled until 2033, 2034, right at the end. And if we don't get those done, or at least we get into the construction of those before we go back in 2040 and ask people to re-up, we're going to be running into a brick wall. So for me, it's going to have to be a high hurdle, and I'm going to have to learn more about it. But at first blush, for me, it's like, that's a named project. We've got to do something there. We told people, and we're either going to have to come up with a really good story, facts, or we have to deliver the project that we told them. So I'm interested in hearing more about that and visiting with Director Perotti and kind of seeing the site and finding out why that doesn't work as we thought it might in 2010.
Chair,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Apparently, Mr. Scott Wentz had his hand raised, and I didn't see him for public comment.
Yeah,
So if we
Mr.
can take
Wentz
that
kind of
now.
was wondering where you were on Measure A here.
Scott, is that you right there?
Scott, we thought you were asleep at the wheel, man.
Yeah.
Hello?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Scott Wenz representing Cars Are Basic. It's been a while. Cars Are Basic has been involved with the Goleta issue since the day Goleta was formed as a city. So we can give you some background, Director Hartman, if you wish it. The issue that we have with the city of Goleta is that the city of Goleta is not following what we consider to be state of California protocol. The city of Goleta has stated repeatedly, both in print and at city council meetings, that they have a bike plan. Under CEQA, they must then create an EIR for their bike projects within the city of Goleta. They haven't done that. They've used every excuse in the book. The city of Goleta has been involved with Brown Act violations. All but one city council member showed up at an outreach program at the city community center, and two members of Cars Are Basic walked up to Mayor Perotti and Councilman Kiriakis asking when is the bike count for Old Town Goleta going to happen, and both answers were, yes, in fact, we will have the bike count before we vote on it. It did not happen. So we're having an extreme amount of problem with the way the city of Goleta operates, but in part, this is a problem with how staff is vetting projects. The city of Santa Barbara in November of 2023 approved a capital improvement project that stated it was for one area, but in fact took in almost 3/4 of the entire city of Santa Barbara. In that process, the city of Santa Barbara included their bicycle master plan. That bicycle master plan then became part of the public works documentation, and under CEQA, the city of Santa Barbara has to do an EIR because it includes the entire city. The city of Santa Barbara hasn't done it. Where has been the staff of Sbcag's comments about, we don't know where these EIRs are? I mean, we have a serious problem with what's going on. And I could go on for probably a couple hours. But you understand what I'm saying here. The city of Goleta, the city of Santa Barbara are demanded by the state of California rules to do an EIR on massive public work projects, and they haven't done them. Why hasn't this organization, and including the South Coast Transportation Committee, said, wait a minute, we can't do this because the law says we have to do this other first? And I want to say I've read Mr. Foster's letter, and I'm in fairly good agreement with that. Thank you very much for your time, and hope you have a good year.
Thank you. Okay, that closes out public comment. There's any other comments? I don't think we need, do we need a motion to
Actually,
rescind?
Director Nelson has a question.
Okay, Director Nelson.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo, my preference, like Director Lavaninos or Chair Lavaninos, to bring those STIP funds back to a pot instead of them being reserves. That's actually where I initially started this conversation, heading that direction. What did concern me in the presentation is that some of the new state legislation may potentially impact some of these North County projects. And so I would be interested in maybe seeing keeping those funds in reserve so that we can deliver those North County projects like we have for the 101 as maybe a alternative option. I'm not necessarily convinced on one option or the other. There's good reasons to go down both routes, but that should be something we're also considering is making sure all those regional dollars maybe potentially go to finishing delivering these new projects. And I think Supervisor Lavanino is really, Chair Lavanino is right about that. We have to be careful. It's not going to be 2040 when we have to pass, Measure A 2.0. It's going to have to be 2038 or 2036. So, it's really not that far down the road that we will have to be thinking about those things. So it's really important that we move those projects quickly as possible, especially as some of these projects might have challenges based on new state legislation. I do think some of those projects would potentially reduce vehicle miles traveled, like the McCoy interchange in particular. So I think those are some things we need to look at moving forward.
Director Patino?
Press the button. How is that going to affect the Betaravia and the McCoy interchange with 101? Because they're not scheduled until 2030, 31?
What does blinking mean? Red is on.
Nope, I'm on? Okay,
on.
sorry about that.
There we go.
Okay, thank you. So when you're, anyway.
You can't see it.
Yeah, okay, sorry. So Director Patino, like an example would be the McCoy project, right? We haven't started the environmental document yet for McCoy. So the first step would be doing the environmental document through Senate Bill 743. So we'd have to see whether the environmental document would be approved by the state. So that would be the first step. Assuming it's approved by the state, then we need to make sure it's in alignment with the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure. Once it's in alignment with that, then we need to go through the Caltrans System Investment Strategy process. So that's the flow chart. Assuming you get there, then we can go get outside funding and then deliver the project.
Okay, I guess my concern is the funding, because we probably won't be ready for that until 2026. So I don't see it interrupting us, is what I'm saying.
So if we're, as long as we're using local funding to complete the environmental document, then yes, we can work with the city on getting the environmental document prepared and then submitted to the state.
Okay, but by funding wise was my concern, and I'm saying I don't see it affecting us funding wise.
So we do have local Measure A that we can use for the environmental document, unless you want to add on, Margie.
Well, I think the issue is that Caltrans may not approve the project regardless of funding because it does not align. It may not align with their policy document. That's the issue that we want to raise to you. That we may need to either find another way to implement it, but the Caltrans may veto it anyway.
Okay. So thank you.
And how much percentage-wise is the matching? What do we? I mean, in the plan, what did we set aside as opposed to what the matching was going to be, or
for the
interchanges?
For the interchanges, Jack is going to pull them up, but I think we're with the Measure A, just the Measure A, we're at about 20%, which has been our target. To Director Nelson's point prior is that the 2020 strategic plan does identify regional funding to help deliver the remaining Santa Maria projects. Okay. But we heard you. What we can do is come back probably in February with a list of options on what the board can give direction on regarding the regional gas tax money and the RSTP, and then how to use that for the 101 and the remaining named projects. There could be a hybrid option where some of the money is shared, but then some is still allowed for the delivery of the remaining projects.
Thank you. Okay. Any
Can
other
I just give you, sorry, one more thing? I just want if you're going to quote me on how much money we've collected.
I'm not quoting you at all.
Okay, all right. It's between 700 and 800 million. I just need to go back.
Said 800, so
Gosh,
sorry.
all right. I knew I opened my mouth and no. So we'll clarify that number, but it's been a significant amount of state funding.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you. Okay, do we need a motion to receive and file, or we just go? Okay, we're just going. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate staff. That was very in-depth, and we'll figure it out from there. Councilman Kiriakou. No.
Thanks for letting me come up. I kind of changed my day around so I could be here.
Great.
You know, I appreciate the concerns that were just addressed about named projects and the need for a high bar, and I absolutely agree with you that the bar should be high. I also heard something yesterday that I think is important. Regionalism is determinative. And I think we should think about that within the context of promises that were not just made to the voters of Santa Barbara County in 2008, but also promises that were made to the citizens of the Eastern Galeta Valley in 1993 before Galeta even incorporated. The Eastern Galeta Valley Community Plan that you currently have is rooted in the 1993 plan. Equal Fowler and all the different component parts that we now call Project Connect are a named project in that document. Going all the way back to the 90s, at a time when, regardless of your feelings about agriculture and whether or not it should become housing and where and urban limit lines, the Eastern Galeta Valley Community Plan assumed that no traffic from residential housing would emerge from those ag parcels that are along the Hollister corridor. If the county is looking now at increasing the traffic beyond the assumptions from 1993, and assuming that we're living now in a VMT world where your ability to acquire funding for traffic mitigation is now based on VMT rather than level of service at intersections. I just want you to think about what will that do to the Hollister corridor, which not only the county is looking at for housing, but the city has already done a number of rezones right on the corridor or right adjacent to it. The Yardy project was in the news, 374 units, lower income and moderate deed restricted housing coming in that corridor. How are they supposed to get in and out of there? What about the infrastructure improvements that have been delayed since before cityhood? So I just ask you to look at that, look at the whole region, not just one named project and one part of Galeta. Look at Galeta as the whole. Look at regionalism from a housing perspective, city and county, as you consider what's the best thing to do here. Thank you.
I think you bring a good point. That was really good. I think that's what we need to hear at the next Sbcag meeting before we take a vote on this, because we all have to get educated on what the big picture is. Okay, great, because it is a 30-year document as well, so which is things are happening. So thank you for that. All right, so we have received and filed that presentation. That moves us to item B. Madam Clerk.
Item 6B, Sbcag 2024 Committee Appointments. 6B1, appoint one delegate and one alternate to the California Association of Councils of Governments, CalCog.
Terry, instead of reading all of them, can we just read one and then do the appointment?
I can let you know who's already assigned
and
stuff.
Let's do that. So we're talking about CalCog.
CalCog. So currently, Director Osborne is our primary member with Director Patino as the alternate.
We good keeping it that way, Director Osborne? Okay. Director Patino? Good. Okay, let's go to 2.
Number 2 is appoint one delegate and one alternate to LoSAN. Currently, we have Director Williams as our primary and Perotti as the alternate.
We okay with that? Or
Well, if Director Williams would like to continue, I'd be fine with that, but he's not here.
I don't think he wants to leave LoSAN.
He doesn't want to?
Yeah, I don't think so.
It's really, that I haven't been a very good alternate on that one because it always falls on a day when I have other commitments.
Okay.
So I'm.
Anybody else
gonna be
interested
able
in
to do it.
taking the alternate role on LoSAN? Going once. Going twice. Okay. Well, a not very good alternate is better than no alternate. So I don't think Doss misses many of those meetings anyway.
he
So
doesn't.
okay,
Okay.
we'll leave it the way it
Okay,
is, and
I'll
if
say
somebody
it.
else
All right.
finds in their heart to bail out Director Perotti. Okay.
Okay.
Item 3.
Number 3 is appoint one delegate and one alternate to the Coastal Rail Coordinating Council. Currently, Director King is the primary member, and Director Rouse is the alternate.
Director King, are you still good?
Yeah, I'd like to stay on that if you don't mind.
You bet. Director Rouse? We're good?
Okay.
All right, move to 4.
Number 4, appoint one member and one alternate to the Calvans Board of Directors. Currently, we have Director Nelson as the primary and Director Julian as the alternate.
Director Nelson?
I like
With that?
Yeah, I'd like to stay on there. I'm on the executive committee now, and we're tackling a lot of big projects and getting that organization on the right track. I'd be happy having it off in a year or two.
Okay, and then Director Julian's given a thumbs up, so we'll keep that the same. Number 5?
I missed this one. Appoint members to the Highway 154 Safety Committee, I believe is Director Hartman, King, Infante,
And
Parodi,
Parodi?
and Caps as the members. You want to keep the same? Okay,
Yeah, we'll keep that one the same.
thank you. Okay, so now we have appoint members to the Sbcag Executive Committee. Chair, Vice Chair, immediate past chair, and chairs of North County and South Coast Subregional.
Who are those people?
Currently, last year was Director Osborne, Lavanito, Williams, Patino, and Clark, and then this year for South Coast is Caps Caps and Patino as chairs for North and South Coast.
So you're North County and she's South County Chair. I'm Chair, Director Rouse,
And Lavanito and
and
Osborne.
then Osborne is past Chair. Okay, that's the Executive Committee. Great.
Sound good?
Yep. Let's go to number 7.
Okay, appoint a board delegate to participate in the Central Coast Coalition Sacramento Legislative Advocacy Day, tentatively scheduled for March 27th, 2024.
March 20th it has on the agenda.
20th, sorry.
Okay.
I printed the.
Anybody want to go to
correction.
Sacramento?
I would.
Yes? Director Hartman.
Hartman, okay.
Great.
And last but not least, appoint Sbcag Chair, Vice Chair, immediate past Chair to participate in the legislative advocacy activities in Washington, D.C. for week of February 26th, 2024.
Yep. Janelle, you're already going? Yep. Okay. So it's Janelle, Director Rouse, myself.
Okay.
All right. So let's, can I get a motion for all those recommended actions 1 through 7?
So moved. Second.
Patino.
Moved by Director Rouse, seconded by Director
Patino.
Patino Parodi. All right.
Begin with P.
Roll
Okay.
call.
Director Williams. He's absent. Caps.
Aye.
Hartman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Osborne.
Aye.
Infante.
Aye.
Julian.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
Patino.
Aye.
Parodi.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Rouse. And Chair Lavanino.
Aye.
Motion passes 12-0.
Okay, that takes us to item 7, our Executive Director's Report. Margie.
Mr. Chairperson, members of the board, I want to say Happy New Year and happy anniversary. I have my 7-year anniversary of working for Sbcag. And I just noticed in that presentation that you were just given about the growth in Measure A revenue. And if you could see in 2017, when I started my job, it immediately went up. And it went from 37 million to 42 in that first year. So there you go. And now it's up to 55 million per year. So maybe just a coincidence, but anyway. The governor has proposed his budget for the 24-25 year. We've been hearing some troubling news about that, and so we're dealing with that. We're reacting to that. We're monitoring the implications closely, and we'll have more information for you at your next meeting with our state consultant, our state legislative consultant, Gus Corey, will make a presentation and give you the latest there. As I announced at the sub-regional meetings last week, Ken Epperson has retired from Sbcag. His last day in the office was last week. He's had a very fulfilling career at Sbcag. He was with us for 21 years. I'm really sad to see him go. He was the Traffic Solutions Director that entire time. He will be at your February meeting to give a official goodbye at that time. As we begin the new year and a new chapter for Sbcag, I've appointed Aaron Bonifilio to be in charge of the Rail and Transit Division as well as the Traffic Solutions. So we're looking at consolidating those two departments moving forward. There's a lot of synergies between the staff. They do a lot of similar things and they work together. So, and they also, prior to this change, they were sharing one of the staff persons as well. So I see this as an efficiency and collaborative process moving forward. And another good news item from our Traffic Solutions team, Peter Williamson has been elected to serve a 2-year term on the Association for Commuter Transportation, the Southern California Chapter Board. This is an honor for him to serve and represent Santa Barbara at that level. This is the premier organization and leading advocate for commuter transportation and demand management professionals. So we're really proud of him that he has been elected to that board. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair and you can continue on. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Maybe a coincidence, maybe not, who knows, yeah. All right, let's go to number 8, Caltrans Director Report. Mr. Eads.
All right, good morning still. Mr. Chair, members of the board, Scott Eads here, Caltrans District 5 Director. Just a few things for you today. One is a reminder, really, that the Caltrans 24-25 Sustainable Transportation Planning grants are due today. So they're due at 5 p.m. today, so your staff should have already been working on those. As a reminder, it's about developing planning documents. There's a few different categories: sustainable communities, climate adaptation, and strategic partnerships. So again, I'm sure those were already in the works. It's just a reminder to turn those in by the end of the day today. Also wanted to mention we have a Guadalupe Projects open house that's being planned. We're targeting Wednesday, January 31st from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Guadalupe City Hall. So we'll be talking about a whole host of projects. There's a lot going on in Guadalupe, and Caltrans is leading many of those projects, and really proud of the recent coordination between the city and Sbcag and Caltrans to consolidate some of those efforts and have Caltrans be able to bring those projects to construction. I think we'll see savings, and it's also a benefit to the community to be able to construct some of those improvements together. So there's many different projects that will be discussed there. The Highway 1 Napomo Mesa repaving project, Highway 1 Santa Maria River Bridge replacement project, downtown Guadalupe sidewalk repair and replacement, also downtown Guadalupe repaving, 166 and 1 intersection improvements, and Highway 1 shoulder widening south of 166. So again, a lot going on there. Looking forward to talking with members of the community and anybody else that's interested. And then the last thing I just want to mention is grant opportunity. California Energy Commission announced grants for their government fleet charging infrastructure. It's aimed for electrification of light-duty city, county, and tribal government fleets in California. Applicants can receive around $6 million, well, up to $6 million for electric fleet charging infrastructure. There's $30 million available, and applications are due by April 5th. That's all I have. Happy to take any questions.
Questions for Caltrans? Anybody? We're all good? Director Hartman?
Would you send information about the last grant just out to us, please?
Certainly.
All right, we'll see you on the 31st in Guadalupe. All right, so that takes us to committee meetings. Item 9.
Oh, sorry. Calvin's board meeting, January 11th, and report by Director Nelson. May not be there.
I'm still here. We're still working on our electric vehicle deployment for the Calvans. As you guys may know, that Calvans had the single largest electric van purchase in the country. I understand about almost 200 electric vans. There was an initial recall on the Ford vans that we were getting retrofitted with electric Vixens. So that slowed that down a little bit, but we are looking to have those start to arrive sometime in the spring.
Excellent.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. All right, takes us to 1-minute reports. Director Hartman, let's start over with you.
Well, I was reminded when Director Eads talked about the Caltrans Sustainable Communities grants, and just wanted to announce that the tribe, the Chumash tribe, working in collaboration with the city of Solvang, Buellton, and the county, submitted a grant for that for the, what we're calling the Santa Ynez Regional Connector, which used to be known as the Regional Trail or Regional River Trail. And we're really appreciative because we have a coordinating committee, and Sbcag is part of that, and their knowledge is invaluable.
Okay, anybody else with 1 minute reports? Nope, we're all good. Anybody out in the hinterland with a 1 minute report? We're all good. All right, we are adjourning. Next meeting is February 15th, 2024.